So good afternoon to everyone who is joining us. It's great to see everybody back again. We're about halfway through with our outreach series, starting with number 5. For those of you joining us today, my name is Christine Krieger, and I am the Professional Development Consultant for the Colorado State Library, and I'm going to be tech support for today's session. We are going to ask that everyone keep your video off and remain muted until we get to questions. We should have time at the end for questions, and you can feel free to turn your video or audio on when we get to question time. You may also ask questions in chat, and I'll help monitor chat along with the presenters to make sure that questions get addressed. So without further ado, I am thrilled to introduce staff from the High Plains Library and your fabulous presenters for today. We've got Rick, Elena, Brittany, and Carolyn.
Thank you, Christine. Hello, and welcome to Event Services, Community Conversations, and Feedback Loop. I am Brittany Rains, and my pronouns are she, hers, and hers.
Hi, I'm Carolyn Valencia, Outreach Librarian. My pronouns she, hers.
And hello, I'm Elena Rosenfeld. I'm the Community Engagement and Strategies Manager. My pronouns are she, her, and hers.
I'm Rick Medrano, Patron Services Supervisor at the Erie Community Library branch, and my pronouns are he, him, his.
Before we start, we would like to take a moment of mindfulness. High Plains Library District acknowledges with respect that the land we are on today in Weld County is the traditional and ancestral homelands of the Arapaho, Cheyenne, and Ute nations and people. This was also a site of trade, gathering, and healing for numerous other Native tribes. We recognize the Indigenous peoples as original stewards of this land and all the relatives within it, and we further acknowledge the forceful removal of the populations after the Medicine Lodge treaties and atrocities such as the Sand Creek Massacre. Our intentions are based on our desire to ground and to acknowledge and support a state of change. We bring our increased awareness and consciousness into this space now and into the spaces we inhabit. We believe this land acknowledgement is a process of deepening our relationship to personal power and land. We acknowledge we are strangers on stolen land. With this acknowledgement, we bring energy that infuses presence, clarity, and a deep longing to be in alignment. Again, thank you for joining us today. This is the 5th session in a series of 8 trainings focused on outreach librarianship. Please put any questions in the chat and we will monitor these as we go. So our objectives for today are to learn how we manage our event services, how we go about our strategic planning, examples of our community conversations, the feedback loop functionality that we use, and the challenges that we experience along the way. So requesting HPLD to attend our events comes through our partner agencies and our staff. Our partner agencies can directly request us to attend their events through our request a visit link on our website. We went into more detail in this on our outreach services presentation on how this tool actually works. Our staff also attends monthly networking meetings in different service areas, and as event requests are discussed at these meetings, our staff members submit these requests on behalf of our partner agencies. When staff submit these requests, they are able to communicate directly in the form of how many attendees are expected at the event, if they would like a vehicle or an activity, and how many additional staff they think they will need to staff the event. This helps from a management perspective to schedule staff to make sure events are adequately staffed. It also helps us to determine our level of promotion we can expect to have in the community. For accepting and declining requests, we accept and decline event requests on a couple of different elements. Primary considerations are staffing availability and our priority populations. Secondary considerations are service area and the level of promotion that we can expect. If a request comes in and they are for the outreach service area, so this area that is not covered by the branch or member locations, These are prioritized over branch and member locations. So here's just a map of the different service areas that we have, and you can see how large the outreach service area is because it's mostly a rural area. Then we consider branch and member service areas. So for the level of promotion, we consider how many expected attendees are expected to attend. An event with expected attendance of, say, 300 will be prioritized over an event that only expects 25 attendees when all other factors are constant. We try to accept all requests. However, we have many requests, especially between the spring and fall, and it requires us to prioritize events that we attend. We also keep track of every event that we do not attend so we can review these at the end of the year. I like to have a process in place in order to justify why we are prioritizing certain events over others so we can be accountable to our public if they have any questions on that. So staffing events. When assigning staffing for our events, we consider whether the request is for a large district-wide event where the event is promoted to the entire community or multiple service areas, or if it is targeted in a specific single service area like our member service areas, and it is not really intended for the entire community audience. An example of a large district-wide event is Project Connect, which is marketed to our entire northern service areas, whereas a specific school back-to-school night is marketed to a limited audience that attends that specific school. So if there is a district-wide event, we expect more attendees, then we will also schedule, more staff for that. We do not currently have a solid formula for our district-wide events. We do use a general guideline of at least 2 staff members for safety reasons, up to 200 attendees. And then it will depend on if we provide an activity or not. If we do provide an activity, we consider adding additional staff to staff that activity after we get to expected 200 attendees. We also rely on previous year's attendance and staffing to help guide our staffing decisions, and then we base adjustments on those. So if a staff gives us feedback about an event saying we didn't really need 3 people here, we make note of that and take that advice forward. If we have a vehicle request, we will also send 2 staff for safety reasons. However, if it is just a booth request in a single service area, we might only assign 1 staff member for those requests, as it is in a public area that is going to be shared with other partner agencies. At most of our events we attend, we do provide an activity, and usually we assign 2 staff as a default. Some of our larger district-wide events, we assign as many as 8 different staff based on our services and activities that we are providing. So we have vehicles for request. Both our bookmobile and pop-up library provide circulation services at events. Our pop-up library was specifically designed and purchased to engage our community at outdoor events like town parties, city festivals, and farmer markets. It provides a specialized collection of library material that patrons can check out. It has 2 sides that pop open that allow for displays of these items, along with 2 touch screens that we can use to display our in-branch library programs, and allows for easy navigation of our library website for patrons. It is equipped with a sound system which is used to play music and communicate through a mic to a large outdoor audience. This vehicle does not require a large area to park and is easy to maneuver. Our bookmobile is our largest vehicle and provides the most complete collection of circulation material. It does require a large area to park and is not the best option for all of our events. It is also one of our better options, though, for our winter months, as our pop-up is very season specific and usually does not go out in the winter. So preparing for our events, there are many steps when we prepare for our events. Only, like I said, 2 of our vehicles are requestable. So we do have different supervisors over each of the vehicle, the bookmobile and the pop-up, due to the different functions of these vehicles. Staff work with the supervisors to ensure the vehicle is available to take to our events. Once a vehicle is secured, staff plan an activity to engage the public. Some examples of our activities include making at Free Comic Book Day. We attended in a partnership with a local comic book store. STEM activities like stomp rockets and giant catapults at a school field day, and using our prize wheel at our migrant family picnic. So those are just some activities that we have developed. Part of the activity may require our staff to request additional equipment through our centralized staff sharing equipment. These pictures are just examples of what it looks like when our staff has to go in and request those pieces of equipment. So if a staff member wants to use the prize wheel or even canopies, these items do have to be requested ahead of time through our staff equipment catalog. This is a calendar-based equipment reservation system. It's a LibCal product. We also run our specialty checkout through that exact same software. And it allows for these items to be ready and requested for specific dates of use. We use the same system to request promotional bins. We have different promotional bins to include kids, teen, adults, and families. These bins contain our most current promotional material for in-branch programs, along with general library service material, preloaded cards, which are just active use cards that can be used immediately to check out material, and library swag. During our events, we want to gather as much feedback about our community's perspective of libraries and their experience interacting with them. Over the last year, we have worked hard to create intentional activities that invoke feedback from our patrons. We use this feedback as qualitative feedback and for improving our library services and programs. We gather this feedback for all library locations. In the last 6 months, we have developed a district-wide survey in both English and Spanish that could be used at our events and in all our library locations on site as well. This allows for this feedback to go into a single container, and depending on which library location is selected for the patron interaction, the form is routed directly to those member directors or library managers, so they are able to review that feedback in real time. So we have lots of different types of events. Our single service area includes specific town events and are usually in our southern library locations, in our outreach service area, and our member service areas. So some of those include Evans Heritage Days, Miners Day, Mead Block Party, Grover Days, and Erie's Touch a Truck. Then we have district-wide events, and these are events that are marketed beyond that single service area. And most of the district-wide events are located in our Greeley-Evans area, as we do have 4 different libraries in that service area alone. Most of our district-wide events are also annual events that we do from year to year, like our Yes Fest event.
Okay, so you caught, some of what Brittany was saying in terms of strategizing on how many people you were going to be serving and all that. That's part of, good question about Yes Fest. I'll actually get into that. We're going to talk a little bit about how to strategize. And while we're focusing on events, this can be anything. This can include programming, your services, because let's face it, we have limited time, resources, money, staff, especially if you are 1.5 staffed library. So you want to be as strategic as possible about it. And what I'm going to talk a little bit now is, we can talk about past experience guiding our decisions. How do things align with our priorities? What we're learning currently, the feedback loop that was mentioned. A key point is talking to people. And so let's talk a little bit about getting insight from our community members. And Brittany, if you'll jump to the next slide. Voila, we're going to talk about Yes Fest. But first, we're going to talk about a program called Ready, Set, Create. This is a program that the Library District did with the Space Science Institute in an effort to get kids about 2nd to 5th grade involved in being engineers. So we partnered with civil engineers and targeting kids from populations that are underrepresented in civil engineering. That would be people from poverty class, or at least economically challenged classes, people who are non-white, and girls. So how do you find out our current status in the community, as well as how do we engage people? Well, you talk to people. Some libraries talk specifically to families and said, what are you interested in? What connects with you? Our library, we end up talking to people who are trusted community members. So we reached out to the Centennial area BOCES that has a connection with our Spanish speaking population, as well as with the school districts. We talked with the science people in the school district, the groups that are working particularly with our non-English populations, the ones that are focusing on grant possibilities, and said, what's getting in the way with kids? What can we do to help? We got some really great insights. For example, we found out a big challenge is that engineering is seen as something that rich people can do, or that you have to get A's in math and science. Some of our civil engineers were in these conversations, and they're saying, oh my gosh, I barely eked through some of these classes. It's because I cared and had the interest, and that was the driving force. So he said, okay, building interest is a big priority if we want this program to succeed. Similarly, another person brought up the fact that parents get in the way. They tell their kids they can't do it. And that was an interesting aha, because this person said, you know what you need to do? You have to have an event. You have to get people involved and their parents involved. You should have a festival. So that led from our Ready, Set, Create program, which was sort of a traditional library programming format, to creating an event called Yes Fest, Youth Engineering and Science. And so then we got it stuck with saying, well, how do we plan for Yes Fest? Guess what? We had more community conversations. We brought in some families. We brought in engineers. We also brought in people from the community where we were going to hold the event. We found out that National Engineering Week, which we thought would be ideal in February, actually is when there's a huge volleyball tournament in the community. And so there'd be no venues for us. So we said, okay, let's shift to September if that would work. September worked for the community. It worked for us because, hey, it started the school year, science fair time. So basically we went from community conversation to community conversation, get new ideas and ways to get this whole thing revved up. And we had a great event. And then of course, COVID hit, which slowed us down. But we are hoping to continue with the Yes Fest efforts and keep having conversations. But one of the big challenges is choosing the right people. And by the way, this is the Pac-Man Nebula. And how can I resist the Pac-Man? But it's nebulous. How do you choose the right people for your conversation? Part of it is, what do you want to learn? So I was wondering in the chat, if you were wanting to learn something about your specific community issue, if you're in a school, how do you help the teachers find the school library as a valuable resource? That might be the same thing for academic libraries and faculty. So in your chat, who would you invite to a community conversation? Okay, maybe I need to target this a little bit. What would you say is a priority for, all right. Places that serve senior citizens, the teens not going to the schools, not coming into the libraries. So, okay, let's take that question of reaching the teens that are not going to the school. You could talk to teachers about this. Who else could you talk to find out why the teens aren't coming into the schools and not the library? La Familia liaisons, yes. All right, yeah, if you don't have the homeschools, and of course, there's a lot of homeschool support groups that you might be able to get to chime in on that. Yeah, who is seeing the teens? Are the teens all hanging out at a particular coffee shop? And maybe chat with the coffee shop owner. Yeah, next door, that's a good one. Is social media? Mental health providers? Yeah. So it really is as big or small as you need it to be. So you choose the right participants for whatever you're trying to figure out. And then let's go ahead and hop to the next slide. You have to have the right conversation to get the information you need. I have a few examples. I know there's more examples out there, but consider there's risks and opportunities with any type of feedback tool you use. I mean, surveys are great for wide distribution. You're not quite sure if people will actually respond. You're also not sure who is responding. So you might be getting very general input. You might be getting input from the people over there that you weren't actually wanting to have involved. So it's a good starting point. And especially if you have general questions that you want answered, that's where a survey is really handy, can get you started. You also want to be very careful not to imply a false promise that you're going to actually do something, participate in an event or create an event based on it. It's your insight starter. Interviews. Great for getting insight. Any ideas about why an interview is a challenge? Why it might not work as you intended? Yeah, very time consuming. Thanks, Christine. You're talking to people one at a time. And people tend to be, for the most part, really nice when you're asking what they want and what we're lacking. So they might actually say, oh, it's all great. So you have to be very careful on your questions so that there's a freedom to respond. Or sometimes, you know, it doesn't necessarily click when you're talking one-on-one. They'll leave and say, oh my gosh, I forgot to say this thing. So there's that risk of interview that you can miss some things that could be really critical insights, or that you might be driving the conversation. Actually, focus groups has that same challenge. You might be driving the conversation because you're using emotion-laden wording, and you have to be very careful about that. That's why they usually say have a professional facilitator there. Another intriguing challenge is enough staff to help it go through, staff and volunteers or assistants, because if you're taking charge of facilitating the conversation, keeping it moving, yep, they like to please us, which is really nice. If you can have a facilitator who is tracking and keeping things going, then you also need somebody who's taking the notes, copious notes. And you make sure your group is comfortable with those notes. You have people who don't speak English well, do you have it in their native language? Or do you have somebody translating? That's going to be more complexity. The challenges and the opportunity is to think through these in advance so you can make it as powerful and as useful as possible, because that's going to really lead you to some great ideas and great opportunities, because the more you're working together, the more opportunities you have suddenly appearing because people recognize you as an active part of your community. And I like that write-in section. There's always that chance to say, here's something else. Good catch. So anyways, that's what I have on the aspect of community conversations. Sadly, I need to leave pretty soon from this meeting. So if you have questions, if I raise questions without answering them, please contact me. My contact information is along with everybody else's at the end, and I'll be happy to talk more. And thank you.
Thanks, Elena. So as the outreach librarian for MOVE, during Ready, Set, Create, I was the librarian that took that program out into our community, and I focused on the school age kids at the Jesus Rodarte Center in Greeley, Colorado. So from that work I did at the Rodarte Center, I was then asked to sit on a party planning committee for the Rodarte Center's 40th anniversary. And then from that community conversation, I was very, very blessed to have the opportunity to sit on the Martin Luther King March and Celebration Planning Committee. So I have been a planning committee member since 2019. In 2019, we offered 3 Let's Talk About Race programs. The vehicle that Brittany referenced, the pop-up, vehicle was utilized at the actual celebration. It was parked out in front of the Union Colony Civic Center. That pop-up was able to offer theme-related resources as well as hot coffee, and we know how important hot coffee is. And then, like we've discussed, we had our pandemic, and so we were not able to offer anything in person, but in 2021, what we did with the pop-up vehicle is we were able to offer various locations where they could pick up the t-shirt. So we had a t-shirt, and as soon as you registered for this virtual event, you could register for a t-shirt. We also offered take and makes, and you can see 2 examples of our take and makes for 2021. We wanted to be engaging our community. So these are kind of action items, like how do we integrate change and positive growth? And in the very bottom slide, you will see me and Amy Ortiz, who is our event and experience supervisor, speaking at the actual celebration in 2020. Brittany, will you please go to the next slide? So being encouraged by my colleagues as well as the Martin Luther King Planning Committee, I wanted to continue the work that I was doing with Let's Talk About Race. So Let's Talk About Race, you know, inspired by the work of Kirby McCurtis, Ellie Jane Bruce, and Jessica Ann Bratt. I wanted to elaborate on that. And so what I did was I created High Plains' first family book club. It is called Widening the Window. It is a 4-month series, and it is designed for 8 families. We meet the first Saturday of every month, and we meet for an hour and a half. 10 book bags were created, and the thing that I'm really, really jazzed about is Widening the Window was able to receive financial support from the High Plains Library District Foundation Board Designated Fund. So they provided some financial support, and because of that, I am able to gift 8 of those book bags to our participants. So they are able to grow their family library, or perhaps they want to share those EDI resources with another family. Because of that financial support, though, that became a community conversation that I, as well as my manager, Brittany, and my 2 other colleagues that are involved in Widening the Window, that became a community conversation that I had quarterly with our foundation board. They wanted to know how the funds were used. They wanted to know who was signing up. They wanted to know the books, and they wanted to know the crafts. So a little bit about my book club. We are focused on 3 picture books, so EDI picture books, and 1 adult nonfiction. Now, the adult nonfiction I chose is My Grandmother's Hands. It is a very gracious and kind approach to focusing on racism and the racialized trauma that you can feel in your body, regardless of whether you have a white body, a black body, a brown body, a police body. The 3 picture books, we started with Our Skin, which was the theme of observation. October's theme was empathy, so we chose Chocolate Me. And the 3rd month, November, we are going to focus on loving kindness, and we will be reading the book Not Quite Snow White. So each month has a focus, has a theme. Once we do our family story time, the kids then go to a room where they work on a craft, and then the adults kind of jump into some courageous conversation. Super blessed to be working with our school district. So Greeley Evans School District 6, I have 2 facilitators that are very, very well-versed in EDI work. And so tying this all into HPLD's strategic plan, I just wanted to real quickly share with you our goals. and our outputs and our outcomes. So our goal is to positively validate students and caretakers' identity by providing mirrors through selected literature. Another goal is to connect and learn about one another, developing a basic understanding by providing windows through this literature and open dialogue. An output is that we retain 90% of our attendance rate, and 50% of participants will check out related resources. We do have the pop-up vehicle attending each Saturday session, and we had some really good checkouts this last Saturday, so that's exciting. We have an outcome of increased civic engagement, which we all know how important that is. Another outcome is courageous community dialogue around sensitive subjects. And the last outcome, one of the outcomes is increased knowledge of tools which support healing and management of trauma. So this is hands-on work with yoga, breathing, just being aware of what's happening in your body. And the last one is growing our great partnership with School District 6. That's all I've got.
So throughout all aspects of interacting with our patrons within basic servicing, the event services, community conversations that both Elena and Carolyn have touched on, we do have the opportunity to collect patron feedback. And our departmental goal at this time is that we collect feedback about at 75% of our events that we attend. So what is the purpose of the feedback loop? We want to engage the branches and all aspects of the library and receive feedback from that can improve all parties. Negative feedback can help us improve where we are hitting shortcomings. Positive feedback can make sure that we are doing those positive things in our community and being more responsive and reflective over those kinds of things, and including them in more and more services that we have. Ideally, we want to provide both, and the purpose of everything, of all of this, is to improve. So one of the ways that we have done this at several of our community events, this can either be done formally with like formal questionnaires and questions, or you can get through more, less formal and more interactive conversations. One of the more formal ways that we collect data are these sandwich boards. We put a quick question up and just say, hey, how can the library, what ways can the library help you? How do you use the library? What would you like to see at the library that we don't have? Or when we went to a teen career fair, we asked, what is your dream job? These not only provide a hook to get people into our space and allowing us to talk to them a little bit more and showcase our resources, but it is also a way that we can kind of have those conversations about what services we have. We can train patrons on some things and offer some of these more direct opportunities to them. So for example, at one of our events, we asked, what would you like to see at the library that we don't currently have? Almost a third of the responses were people wanting laptops or MiFis or technology to check out. And we did have a service like that in place called Specialty Checkout. So we quickly learned that we need to do a better messaging to get that service out to the community and know that this is something that is available to them. But while we had those patrons right there, we were able to tell them and give them, some of the pamphlets and stuff about this service, train them on site. And these are people who are just coming to us at an event that, maybe they don't visit the library very often. So we're able to really train a user group that we would have very, very little interaction with otherwise on some critical resources for them. And these are just a couple examples, pictures here. The two on the left side and the upper part are the sandwich boards. People would either write with stickies or they could write directly on there. This next picture on the right was at a Boo on Briggs. It's like a trunk or treat. And we had the sandwich board next to our decorations asking them, how we can get some feedback from the library or get some feedback from them. Go ahead and skip to the next slide. Another opportunity we have for this kind of feedback is through a form stack. So this is like a SurveyMonkey essentially, but we utilize FormStack here. And on the bottom part of the right side of the page is a poster that we would have at our booth or attached to the vehicle or wherever we're at the event. And this provides a QR code. So patrons can easily scan the QR code and get to this feedback form stack that's shown at the top of this page. It asks, do you have a library card? How do you interact with HPLD? Was it a library vehicle? Was it a building, a library event? Was it through the virtual library or other? And if they click other, then they can do an entry. What do you think the library's role is within your community? So before even giving us their direct feedback, it kind of prompts them to think about, what do you think we should be doing, or what role do you think we fulfill in this community? There's a section for their comments and suggestions, rate their experience with the library. And one of the more unique things about this platform specifically is we have the opportunity to either attach a picture or a video. And something that we've been able to do here, you know, the age-old saying, a picture is worth 1,000 words. Well, videos can even go further than that. And we've been able to take videos of testimonials from, you know, one of our lobby stops where the patrons were in an assisted living facility. They were probably never going to be able to come physically to a library, unfortunately, but we were able to interact with them and get their testimonial about the quality of the service that we are able to provide to them. It helps our staff understand that they have a deep impact in the patrons' lives, but for our stakeholders, for our admin and our management, it really shows a very meaningful and direct way to see how we are having feedback or interaction with our community, and getting that feedback to us to share out is extremely important. Once we get all of that data through that code, through that form stack, we will export it into an Excel spreadsheet. And here you can see on the left side of the spreadsheet is the question, what question we were asking. The feedback is in the middle, and the themes that this could kind of tie into. So what can the library do for you? Somebody said program for 4th to 5th grade. That falls into the programming and kids, right? So in this way, we can start to develop these codes and see, are people asking mostly for programs? Are they asking mostly for events? Are they just telling us that, hey, we're doing a great job? This is a way that we can really see how and what people are giving back to us. And if we're at an event in a specific library location, so say we're down here in the Erie community, and one of the events we're going to, even though we are outreach staff, we're collecting a lot of feedback about how they're interacting with their branch library. We can give that feedback directly to the branch and let them know, you know, their successes, their failures, their shortcomings. This weekend we were at an event and somebody was telling us how amazing they felt that the story times were. They had been at libraries all across the, you know, the area and from the East Coast, and they finally found one here, and they're just so happy about that. So I was able to share that with our children's librarian, who otherwise would have never heard that sort of feedback. So it's very valuable. The current qualitative codes that we have for this year's data are staff appreciation, activities, the routes, branch feedback, language, and that can vary from, we need more languages within the programs we're offering. They're happy that we have books in their language, anything based around language, programs, materials, and technology. And once we get all of that information compiled and sorted through, we want to make sure that what we're presenting to our stakeholders, to our branches, to our board is something that is easy to understand and interpret and visually appealing. So these are both pop-up reports, essentially the feedback that we get from reports from 2 different quarters of this year. So on the upper left is Q1. We see that we had 99 pop-up visitors. We get some information about the specific survey responses we had, and we have a data point here that 450 take and makes were given to the food bank. On the right-hand side, we can see staff appreciation. the amount of patrons we served, questions specifically about the branches, feedback for take and makes, and how they loved seeing the library in their community, or like easy takeaway points. So both of these are ways for us to share both qualitative and quantitative data without it being just a giant report or a big stack of papers that you just give to somebody and say, here's this stuff, you know, interpret it, figure it out, figure out what's important. We're able to showcase what we think are the important takeaway pieces and really give the stakeholders and those who are making the decisions and funding decisions a really intricate idea of how we are spending our time and what our impact is in the community.
So with all good things come challenges. There are challenges to plan for gathering that feedback. Some of these include collecting data with limited staff when events are very busy. We often have that as a challenge when we do only have 2 staff members and we have to resort to more of the informal and passive data collecting. Also, developing tools that help patrons feel comfortable and are easy and accessible are also challenges. This is the best way to gather that feedback is directly from the patrons. However, how we get it accessible and easy for them, we really have to think through that, and also kind of why we use the QR codes, although that doesn't work for everybody, especially if they don't have digital devices. So many times our staff will just make notes of the comments and statements about the library, as the process to collect that data directly from the patrons is challenging. So trying our best to record what is said and what we find meaningful. Collecting data from our whole community when we have limited resources for translations of services and survey results is another challenge when we live in a community with high diversity. So we know that, you know, we really need to be having our surveys in languages beyond just English and Spanish if we really want to engage our entire community. And in outreach, we have specific priority populations. So how can we do that? One of the things that our department is lucky enough to have is a small budget that we can focus on those translations to be able to translate promotional material and survey results, because as we get those in different languages, we need to then translate them back into English. So collecting data is one step. Sharing this and making the suggested changes is another challenge. So we can share our data, however, we have little influence on whether these suggestions are implemented at library locations. And so how we go about making these suggestions is sharing this information with the branches and also our executive leadership team, and letting them know that this is something our community has suggested and that they would like to see. However, knowing that we have that limited influence, that we just have to acknowledge that maybe not everything is going to result in a suggested change. So going back to kind of what Elena said, that we're not making promises to have a certain program or deliver a certain service because we don't really have control of that. And then also having these suggestions guide our next steps. So as we get these suggestions back, how does that influence our strategic planning in future years as well? I know that in 2022, we have a bigger focus on collecting qualitative data over quantitative data, and with that will come new challenges in itself as well. So those are just some of the challenges we have experienced. So does anyone have questions about today's session?
And you guys can you guys can add stuff to chat for questions, or feel free to turn your video on and your microphone on if you would like to ask questions also.
Here is our contact information. If there's any questions that you would like to ask after this session as well, or anything that might come up, as you're thinking about this.
Yeah, and Lisa, you did just pop in some stuff. There is some storage in the pop-up vehicle in the back. There's probably 3 by 8 foot storage bed. Picture of the prize wheel that we mentioned. Do we have a picture of that somewhere? We can get one. And how many languages do we have our post-program evaluations in?
So for our post programs, if we're talking about in branch, at this point, those are, to my understanding, developed in project outcome. And those just default to English, Spanish, and French. In our MOVE department, when we create evaluations, we actually do it in English, Spanish, and then Somali, French, and Burmese. And we use actual community ambassadors to do those translations for us. And so we do have a little bit different of a process. Again, those contractors, which are our community ambassadors, they are paid out of our operational budget for MOVE specifically. So we tend to make sure our material is translated into those languages.
We do provide both. We tend to have paper forms at the on-site, and we would actually end up entering all of that into the digital form directly. And yeah, we can definitely reach out and talk to you, Lisa, about how the pop-up process was and what things we might change if we were to buy it new. I think that the only main things that we've added in the last few years are a step to the back, so it's easier to get in and out of the vehicle. And I think that's about all we've added. But if you want to reach out to Brittany or myself, we can get you some of that information.
And Rick, was Lisa the one that wanted the picture of the prize wheel as well?
Yes.
Okay, perfect.
YesFest, our first YesFest was about 470-ish people. That was in 2019, and it was like the inaugural event. We had about, I want to say 20 or 30 different vendors. They were partners that kind of came and did scientific STEM related activities. And it was meant for those who would traditionally be unserved with STEM events, is kind of how we marketed it. So young girls, minorities, people with social and barrier access issues to different library services or social services, but it tended to go a little younger. We did have a couple of teens come, but for the most part it was, you know, anywhere from 4 to 10 to 12, you know, school age kids.
Any other questions for our folks today?
And this is what's coming up in the remaining of our series. Next week will be community partnerships. So Carolyn will be back for that one. And then on October 19th, collecting data in outreach and community assessment. And then October 26th for our final session, outreach advocacy. So thank you all for coming today.
And I don't see any other questions that have come in, but I want to thank everybody for attending today and for coming back each week. And I want to send out a big thanks to Elena, Rick, Brittany, and Carolyn for sharing all of their fabulous ideas with us. So I will work on getting the archive ready, and I will send that out to everybody tomorrow and post it along with a PDF of the slides. So thanks everybody for attending, and thanks again to our presenters.